A different kind of slavery, non-existing social welfare, and a constitutional crisis with a population on the brink of civil war and division. The possibility for this United States is opening in front of our eyes, and it all has to do with this.
We do have too much regulation in this country.
We have this unelected, fourth unconstitutional branch of government, which is the bureaucracy.
We're going to get rid of fact checkers and replace them with community notes, similar to X.
And of course them. For most of history, power has been wielded by a small circle of elites, with legitimacy arising from ancestral claims or mythical powers, until it broke after long years of struggle because of revolutions across Europe and America. For close to 200 years, while flawed, power became more and more distributed, and legitimacy was created by merit to lead people through elections and equal participation. In this video, I argue that we are entering a time where this system may not adapt well enough to the coming changes and reverts back to a different kind of power, an oligarchy. And how it all starts? You cannot survive without relying on 4 or 5 companies if your work and life involves being online. Corporates today are not like corporates 50 years ago. They are everywhere and they are few in numbers. The phone in your pockets has all the technology in it to dominate you from your bedroom, and if this continues without proper regulation, it will. Some people would click away here saying, oh, but the world already was run as a corporate oligarchy. And I think there is value to that thought and is somewhat true, but it is not the full picture. The traditional industries before the digital world, while holding immense power at the time, had no truly global reach, nor scalability to consolidate every convenience into them. You could argue that OPEC controlled most of the market and price movement of oil. They exerted and still do massive power, which is unelected, using capital in the world through a network of organizations and countries. But are they like Amazon? Can OPEC cover 80% of your life with their services? No. Amazon and the consolidated companies can. What's interesting is that the rise of the internet started out as powers democratizing segments, decentralization of information through services like Google, access to people and connections through Facebook. However, this is where things have changed in recent years heavily. Instead of divergence, these companies started consuming markets, gulping up competition and consolidating market power, where you can virtually not live without them. Just think about how much Google dominates your life. You wake up and you check your emails. A customer requests you to jump on a call with them. Before the meeting, you open Google to put together your research, then jump on their Google Meet to talk with the customer. In the afternoon, you place your bids in their advertisement engine and then log off for the day, turning on YouTube. Amazon, Meta, Apple, and more, from streaming services to entertainment to global logistics and electronics, a few companies define what you do in a day. It could be stopped and mitigated. However, there is a different kind of constitutional crisis. When you learn about the separation of powers, the Federalist founders warned of this exact moment in history. A truly bipartisan Congress splitting the floor almost 50-50. Your voted representatives being in a gridlock. Based on the previous argument, take a look at the case of Google's monopoly lawsuit. My argument is that the current bureaucracy, paired with the fully partisan Congress, is unable to move fast enough to follow the events and react promptly. Despite the antitrust lawsuits having a legal framework in place, the Sherman Act, the Clayton Act, and the establishment of the FTC, the process is the following. Government agencies receive complaints from consumers and other stakeholders, triggering a review. If this assumption moves forward, it will trigger a formal investigation with potentially multiple agencies involved. Once there is evidence, the DOJ and FTC can file a complaint in a federal court and litigation starts with court proceedings. Besides this, there can also be congressional hearings to potentially set up legislative breaks in the system. However, with Donald Trump as president and a highly partisan Congress, there is a legislative stalemate with close to free executive power. Because let's say the previous administration was pushing for Google's lawsuit in executive ways, appointing critical agency heads and executives at the DOJ and FTC. Trump will and already appointed more lenient executives, and with lobbying and support from Google, they could actually distort the judicial process, setting up several barriers to progress. The opposition could still propose legislative breaks that would limit Google's practices, but a slight Republican majority and the lack of 60 votes in Senate would allow to stall and lead to failure. We already see the power of the executive branch, with Trump firing inspector generals, naming James McHenry as head of the DOJ, already launching attacks against Trump's prosecutor Jack Smith, and picking Andrew Ferguson for the chair of the FTC. To add to this, the power of the judicial branch is only as strong as the willingness to, you guessed it right, to execute it. My take is that Ferguson and Gail Slater, appointed to lead the antitrust division of the DOJ, will be used more as executive whips to keep big tech in line with the president's agenda. In conclusion for the first argument, it means that the executive branch, without the legislative branch's ability to move forward, will dominate how corporate power is built out and will be reciprocally influenced by it, from lobbying and sponsorship. On to the third argument. It only took Trump and the corporates 2 weeks to show truly that they don't really care about ideology, but money and power only. As you can see in the last video I did on Trump's ideologies, while Trump's policies mimic some ideological patterns from fascism, some from Christianity and so on, but it is much less cohesive and more transactional in nature. The last 2 weeks seem to confirm this to me at least. Here are my arguments for that. People were quick to jump to conclusion on an all-out military aggression regarding Panama, Greenland, Mexico and Canada, showcasing them as signs of fascist expansionism. But we already saw how these are more likely to be elements of economic coercion. Pressuring Panama already gave Trump the promise that Panama leaves the Belt and Road project with China, a foreign policy win for Trump already, impacting the economy too. Pressuring Canada with tariffs is likely to result in additional economic benefits for the US, depending on the outcome of negotiations with Trudeau. Pressuring Denmark on Greenland will likely yield access to further resources, or pressuring the EU to expand their defense budget, something the US military-industrial complex will benefit from. And the last argument, threatening to pull out from supporting Ukraine, now got replaced by Trump negotiating rare earth materials in exchange for support. These examples show that Trump's overarching strategy is not necessarily motivated by ideology, the strategy to gain better positions for negotiations. It is strictly transactional, despite sometimes crossing paths with ideologies such as nationalism, isolationism, and even traditionalism. Trump is not motivated to take down a forming oligarchy as long as he thinks he can be a part of it. In this new game, corporates and the presidential office are in a more isolated power struggle, where as long as both their interests are met, they can cooperate for economic gains. The name of the game is lobbying, leading to more corporate freedom. Lobbying has been a long-standing issue and struggle between political freedom of speech and the corrupting undertone it has, but what happens if Congress is unable to move forward and judges don't bother certain actors? Corporates are much more free to exert force. Possible campaign contributions or the threat of pulling sponsoring election campaigns is enough to motivate the president to use action or inaction where it favors corporates without the need to touch policies. And don't forget that Trump is also a businessman and has his family as an extended branch of that business, meaning that a potential oligarchy can work through subtle dynamics where businesses supporting Trump and being supported by him offer contracts, board positions, or other forms of compensation to businesses related to the Trump family directly or indirectly, increasing Trump's power on his network. With the judicial branch in check and the legislative one in impasse, the only thing to control is public opinion. By the way, most of you are not subscribing to my channel, but if you would like to see more regarding US politics, their outcomes for the future, subscribe to the channel, it would mean the world to me. Thank you so much. This is the fourth and last element of building a successful oligarchy in the US, and my last argument. It's about having global resources, access, and an oligopoly on information, which is just as important in 2025 as money. Without going down a conspiracy rabbit hole, we can still see how besides the classical intelligence agencies, companies that possess AI computation and data, search engines and information storage, social media and D2C communication, engagement and content filtering algorithms can dominate the market, shape public opinion, referenda outcomes, elections, and also have a firm grip on the economy. And the reason we don't need conspiracies for this to work is exactly because of its transactional nature. You don't have to organize a larger, well-thought-out scheme because any rational agent can see that the alignment of interest will create the system by itself if the conditions are met, which are once again a weak legislative branch unable to exert its power, a judicial branch intimidated by the executive branch, and a long bureaucratic process, financial interest through a vast network of companies intertwined with the family business of the chief executives. From this emerges, if it wasn't clear enough, that businesses don't practice ethics when it is not profitable, and together with an allowing presidential office, a new elite emerges. Companies can also be thought of as vindicative in this process. Previous moral frameworks such as green initiatives and social welfare pushed by the Democrats may have made companies pressured into economically unfeasible outcomes, where they had to invest more under regulation into practices yielding shortened growth. Now we see with Trump how these initiatives will be thrown out the window in the name of fighting woke, which the companies seem to be eager to join. Drill, drill, drill. No emission quotas, no UN Human Rights Council, a boost to the domestic markets, deregulation on everything including AI. All these make a seemingly coherent ideology, where the actual undertone is an economic play for growth, power, and a sense of limitlessness. The problem is that in a world like this, when the economy is doing well because these companies are unregulated in comparison to the past, everyone may win a little in the short run, while the companies win big, and while they solidify themselves for a long reign. People rejoicing about the potential growth this may bring forget that it is going to come at the cost of society, the environment, because once the AI transition is full, people will have no proper education and vocation to train themselves to find meaningful jobs, will have no robust welfare system to support them with their job search, homelessness, tax breaks, and potentially will end up living at the mercy of corporates and a government which is ideologically divided beyond reparation, unable to serve the best interests of the people. If this is the case, which is a possibility, then the oligarchy being built in the US is a late-stage form of capitalism, where government is intertwined with corporate interest, where people get excluded from markets due to AI, being surveilled, being observed, having their data used to maximize their consumption, and where they can be fed any information through algorithms that may skew their perception of reality to believe that the world cannot be better and that the abuses they suffer are natural. If you want to avoid a future like that, I invite you to read, to discuss, to help people see the bigger picture regarding politics and the immediate outcomes. And as always, I was Matt, your host, and you were watching The Y Club.